Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering the news from the Church. Today is Wednesday, December 8, 2021, and these are our headlines. The Pope visited Cyprus and Greece. During the trip, he has once again insisted that Europe should not put obstacles to immigrants. Cardinal Michel called it a great sin to have closed the churches during the pandemic and to have left the faithful without sacraments. The European Union has tried to remove the word Christmas from the official greetings they sent out during this festive season. A group of French academics has denounced the lack of scientific rigor on the report that claimed thousands of child abuse had been committed in France. The Pope has accepted the resignation of the Archbishop of Paris after it became public that he had had a sentimental, non-sexual relationship with a woman. The Pope has traveled to Cyprus and Greece to ask once again from these two countries that Europe opens its borders to migrants who want to enter it.
For 5 days, from the 2nd to the 6th, the Pope visited Cyprus and Greece. He has once again sent a strong message in favor of Europe removing the barriers that prevent the entry of migrants both from Syria and from Africa. He took a group of families with him to Italy. In his message in Cyprus, the Pope again criticized those he considers rigorous. Speaking of St. Barnabas, a native of this island, he said that the apostle does not crush the fragile faith of newcomers with rigorous, inflexible attitudes or with demands that are too severe in terms of the observance of the precepts. On the second day of his visit in Cyprus, he celebrated Holy Mass in a stadium. Many of the faithful took part. He exhorted them to be luminous Christians, to touch with tenderness the blindness of their brothers and sisters, to shine lights of hope in the darkness. In the afternoon, the Pope had his long-awaited meeting with migrants. He listened to the testimonies of 4 people who have arrived in this country seeking refuge, and before them he gave a new speech asking for dignified conditions for those who have been forced to leave their lands. On the 4th day, Pope Francis arrived in Athens. A highlight of his stay in Greece was a meeting with the Orthodox Archbishop Hieronymus II. He also met with bishops, priests, and seminarians and had a private meeting with the Jesuit community. In his first speech in Greece, Francis warned about the retreat of democracy that, according to him, is taking place in Europe. He lamented the rise of authoritarianism and populism in some countries around the world. The Pope also criticized the European Union for slowness and lack of unity. The Pope called on European countries to welcome immigrants who are protagonists of a horrendous modern odyssey, he said. He also criticized politicians for their hypocrisy on climate change. His last act in Greece was a trip to the island of Lesbos, where there is a large refugee camp and where he was already in 2016. It was the most emotional moment of the trip and where he delivered his toughest message against restrictions on the arrival of migrants. The Pope criticized countries that use barbed wire on their borders to prevent the entry of migrants.
Closing churches and leaving the faithful without sacraments has been described as great sin by Cardinal Michel.
Politicians, the media, and technology companies have ruthlessly exploited the COVID-19 pandemic to spread totalitarian thinking that even divides families. The reaction of some bishops and priests to the pandemic, who closed churches and denied people access to the sacraments, was a grave sin that violated their God-given authority, said the prefect emeritus of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. A distinction must be made, he said, between the observance of sensible rules to prevent the transmission of the disease, but this cannot serve as a justification for rejecting the sacraments on principle. Eternal life must take precedence over temporal goods, the cardinal said. In some dioceses in Germany, only people vaccinated or recently recovered from COVID can attend Holy Mass. Measures of this kind, as well as the closing of churches, are shocking proof of the extent to which the secularization and the de-Christianization of thinking has already reached the shepherds of Christ's flock, Mueller said. The task of the Catholic Church and governments is to promote social cohesion and avoid measures that could provoke radical divisions in society. Dismissing people with different opinions as conspiracy theorists or sinners against charity should be rejected, he said. Bishops and priests must not offer themselves as servants to the rulers of this world and become their propagandists. Their task is to serve the reconciliation between God and man and the reconciliation between peoples. Their mission and authority come from Jesus Christ, Cardinal Mueller stressed. In times of crisis, places of worship and people's hearts must be opened so that people can find refuge in God, from whom all help comes. No medicine and no technical innovation could deliver us from death. The bread that Jesus gives is the cure for eternal death and the food for eternal life.
The European Union has tried to suppress the use of the word Christmas on the grounds that it could offend non-Christians.
Both the European Union and the British government do not want the word Christmas to be used in official communications. Cardinal Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, has protested the communication manual, which has finally been withdrawn. The European Union's communication manual, which suggested avoiding certain words such as Miss or Madame, but also Christmas and names such as Mary or John, has been withdrawn. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Vatican Secretary of State, has made a statement on the matter, explaining that unfortunately there is a tendency to homologate everything without knowing how to respect the just differences, risking in the end to destroy the person. In England, British public officials have blocked the word Christmas in the Christmas campaign in favor of vaccination, fearing that it would offend minority religions. The ban, detailed in leaked emails, was revealed as Boris Johnson announced tighter travel restrictions and new rules on the use of masks in an attempt to limit the spread of the new Omicron variant of COVID-19. The British government had planned a publicity blitz to get students vaccinated and tested for antigens and PCR before returning to their families, using the slogan, "Don't take the COVID home for Christmas," but it was vetoed by officials in the Prime Minister's office. A conservative Muslim MP has protested and called the veto of the term Christmas ridiculous.
The so-called Sauvé report on the abuse of minors by priests has been discredited by a group of French academics in that country.
8 leading members of the French Catholic Academy have produced a counter-study that takes apart piece by piece the Sauvé Commission's report on clerical and lay abuse in French clerical structures. They accuse the report of giving exaggerated abuse data. There were not 330,000, but between 4,000 and 27,000 victims, and warned that the report has been carried out with partiality and hostile ideology towards the Church. Meanwhile, the Pope has cancelled his audience with Sauvé. The suspicion that the church is being humiliated and blackmailed into accepting any solution coming from the secularist consensus is more than confirmed. The 15-page text is a detailed and multidisciplinary demolition of the Suave report. The critical analysis on the 8 signatories of this unpublished text, revealed by Lacroix on November 25th, is uniformly negative. Against the methodologically flawed and contradictory results of the report, the scholars show those obtained by the researchers of the École Pratique des Hautes Études, who, from the examination of the archives, identified a range between 4,832 and 27,808 victims. These figures are far from the 330,000 victims of the Suave report. The objection to the legal analysis of the report demonstrates the meaninglessness of any request for collective civil and criminal liability of the Church, of the bishops, of the confessors, just as it nullifies any justification of the request for compensation with the alienation of the French Church's real estate assets.
Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of the Archbishop of Paris after it became known that he had been involved in a sentimental, non-sexual relationship with a woman.
Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Bishop Michel Appetit as Archbishop of Paris. The 70-year-old prelate placed his post at the pontiff's disposal a week ago, once a series of reports surfaced in the press about a past relationship with a woman which he acknowledged was ambiguous. At the same time, the Pope appointed Bishop Georges Pontier, Archbishop Emeritus of Marseille, Apostolic Administrator sede vacante et ad nutum sancte sedis of the same archdiocese. Bishop Appetit announced last Friday that he had placed his position at the disposal of Francis, after denying in part the information published by the weekly Le Point, according to which he had had an affair with this woman, but at the same time acknowledged having had an ambiguous relationship with her, not a sexual one, which led him to step aside so as not to harm the Church.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the European Union's attempt to abolish the term Christmas in the greetings during the holidays.
The European Commission, through the Equality Commission, has published and then later has published a document with recommendations to the member states so that at Christmas time they do not use any type of language that has a Christian religious meaning. They should not say Merry Christmas in their greetings. They should say Happy Holidays. They should not say Christmas period. They should say holiday period. And all this with the excuse that we must use an inclusive language that does not exclude anyone and that non-Christians might feel annoyed if Christmas is officially alluded to. That is, what they want is that Christmas is not called Christmas but call it something else. This reminds me of the arguments used in Spain when they decided to remove crucifixes from schools, from classrooms. They said the same thing then. These bureaucrats of the European community, there are children who are not Christians. It bothers them to see the sign of another religion on the wall. Even then I commented, what you have to do is not to subtract but to add. If there are children who are, for example, Muslims in the classroom, next to Christian children, put next to the crucifix crescent on a green background. If there are children who are Buddhists, put next to the crucifix an image of Buddha. If there are children who are atheists, then put a frame with nothing so that the wall can be seen, that is, nothingness, because atheists are also believers of nothingness made God. Through that empty frame, the wall is going to be seen. You will see the nothingness. Well, no, they decided to remove the crucifixes and not to put anything else. They decided to subtract and not to add, and in the end, who won was precisely nothingness, because now that is what there is, nothing. Well, these bureaucrats, well paid thanks to the taxes of Europeans, including the taxes of Christians, have decided the same thing. We must remove all Christian symbolism. We cannot say a single word to remember that Christmas commemorates an event that gives essence, root, beginning to Christianity. We cannot say anything about it. Happy holidays, happy vacations, but not Merry Christmas, not Christmas, period. The excuse, I repeat, that it may bother those who do not believe in the God of Jesus Christ. What they have to do, if they really do not want to bother anyone, is to add and not subtract, to use a truly inclusive language, for example, to congratulate the Jews on Hanukkah, which is also celebrated at this time. The 6th is the last day of the Jewish holiday, or that when it's April this year, they congratulate Muslims on Ramadan. I don't mind if they congratulate Hanukkah or Ramadan. In fact, there has been such an uproar with this initiative of the Equality Commission that they have had to withdraw the project. The same thing has also happened in England, that although it is no longer part of the European Union, has taken the same path. And curiously, there it has been a Muslim parliamentarian who has protested against the removal of Christian symbols. In view of this, I remembered St. John Paul II and those impressive scenes of the Polish workers kneeling in Mass while they were locked up in the Gans shipyard on strike. Polish workers, Catholics, who belonged to the Solidarity trade union and who confronted the communist regime. I remember that because I thought they used us. They used the capacity of resistance, the strength that gives us Catholics our faith to put an end to the communist tyranny. But what for? To implant another tyranny, the one they're trying to implant in Europe, the secularist tyranny, the tyranny of the atheist God, of the no God, the tyranny that would like to see us eliminated from Europe, not the one that respects the Christian roots of the continent, but the one that wants us to cease to exist so as not to bother them and to rule alone. That terrible communist tyranny passed, leaving a trail of pain. This secularist tyranny will also pass. And it will pass because it is suicidal, like that one, because it is destructive and not constructive. This aggressive secularism, this exclusionary secularism, this secularism is leading Europe to suicide. For example, there are no children. We have the lowest birth rate in the world. It has been a long time since we abandoned the capacity of permanence of the number of inhabitants. It has been a long time since we stopped having an average of 2.1 children per fertile woman in Europe. There are no children. There is no future. That is what they want. Well, that is what they will get, but they will not get to get rid of us. Christ defeated even communism, and Christ will defeat this aggressive and excluding secularist tyranny. Christ won and Christ will win. We will resist as we resisted them, and we will overcome as we overcame them, but we will still have to suffer as we suffered with them. That is why this Christmas I would like to ask everyone to place Christian signs on their balconies or in their windows. Let us not let them corner us. Let us not let them win by putting us in the corner so that we go unnoticed. Christian signs, because we have nothing to be ashamed of because of our faith. Christmas is not the feast of consumerism. Christmas is the feast in which we remember that the Son of God, made man, was born of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So even if it is still a few weeks away, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, even if it will surely make some of those European Union bureaucrats feel sick to their stomachs. See you next week, God willing.
If you wish to be up to date about what is happening in the church, you can follow us in our news page, www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.